On Pavel Bure night, the Leafs get trashed by the Vancouver Canucks 4-0. Find out why the Leafs lost and why this loss will have a greater impact on the remainder of their season more than just this one game. All this coming up on Leafs Cast. Welcome to Leafs Cast. My name's Mark Paul. I'm the host of this show that solely focuses on the Toronto Maple Leafs. This is our post-game show. The Leafs took on the Vancouver Canucks Saturday night, and it was anticlimactic for Leafs fans, aside from potentially, if you watched the beginning and you got to see the Pavel Bure celebration, it was pretty cool being a kid growing up and getting to watch Pavel Bure whenever the Leafs played the Canucks and whenever they were on Hockey Night in Canada late night, and just getting the experience to watch such an incredible goal scorer, such a talented player with such speed. It was just fun to see him speak and to thank guys like Gino Ojic and to see Pat Quinn again, former Leafs coach. It was just a fun ceremony to watch, but everything kind of went downhill for us Leafs fans. The Leafs surrendered 4 goals on 47 shots. The Leafs had 21 of their own. James Reimer didn't play bad in this game. There wasn't a goal that he let in where you thought that it was really his fault. I mean, in reality, let's take 1 second. Let's just put this game into perspective. This is only the 3rd time in 15 games that the Leafs have scored less than 2 goals. Now, that's not bad. It's their first time this year getting shut out. I mean, if you put that over into the course of an 82-game season, you're looking at us getting shut out, 5-6 times throughout the year. And if we can continue our offense, and we're not going to get shut out every night. This was a special night for the Canucks. The Leafs are on their last leg of their West Coast trip, and they just flat out didn't have it. I think you start off with late in the, with 14 minutes or so into the first period, Phil Kessel just gets sucked in to fighting with Alexander Burrows. Like, Burrows is just taunting him, doing exactly what Alexander Burrows is supposed to do. I mean, that's his role. His role is to be a pest, and Phil Kessel can't get sucked into that. He's our best player. We can't have him in the penalty box for 5 minutes. Now, I think it probably should have just been 2 minutes for roughing, because all they did was hug each other and, maybe throw a few smacks around. But nevertheless, Phil Kessel should have never gotten sucked into it. It was stupid. I know that early on the Leafs weren't playing great, but at that point in the game, the Leafs had turned it around. They had begun to produce some offense and hold it in the Canuck zone. It was really after a Colton Orr body check on, I believe it was Alexander Edler, that got things rolling for the Leafs. And so at this point, it was just a completely unnecessary deal. And really, I think it defined the remainder of the game. The Leafs got sucked into a lot, and it was evident by the 9 power plays they gave up. And one of them was a full 5-on-3, 2 minutes, and fortunately, at the time at least, it's 3-0. The Canucks didn't score. You could potentially see that as a swing, but because the Leafs just kept getting drawn back in and not being able to produce any momentum going the other way, they weren't able to actually use the momentum from that killed 5-on-3 for anything productive. When you're looking at 47 shots on goal, how are you going to win? It's becoming a huge question mark now, because we've seen it so many times. 40-plus shots every single game on this West Coast road trip. I mean, the average amount of shots in a game is like 45. 43, 43, and 47 on these last 3 games on the West Coast of Canada. I mean, they did go 2-1, but they played 2 teams that are far below them talent-wise, and the Canucks, who match up very well against the Leafs, showed them you're not going to win any games against a team like this, getting more than double outshot, 47-21. Not only did the Leafs lose and lose pretty bad, Bolland gets stepped on the back of his foot, and Dave Bolland is going to have surgery tonight on a lacerated Achilles. And Randy Carlyle, coach of the Leafs, came out and said, this looks exactly like what happened to Erik Karlsson last year when Matt Cook stepped in the back of his foot. And unfortunately, Erik Karlsson missed 10 weeks. Now, let's take 10 weeks and say that was the minimum. Like, there's no way anybody's coming back from this faster than 10 weeks, unless it is not as badly torn as Karlsson. Now, Karlsson's wasn't completely torn, and so that's why he was able to come back quickly. But if this is just a minor laceration and not nearly as bad, maybe sooner. But you're looking at, from what I've been seeing and from what I was able to gather from what happened with Erik Karlsson last year, it's a minimum of 10 weeks. Now, everybody thought when Karlsson first got hurt that it would be 4 to 6 months. And so you're looking at anywhere from 10 to 24 weeks. Now, if it's 6 months from now, that's the playoffs. And so I don't think you can really expect David Bolland. Worst case, you're not getting him back until the start of the playoffs. Best case, we hope that sometime in February we get to see David Bolland, I think. I think that that's a realistic, let's get him back by February for a playoff, a push if necessary, or at least know we have him back, get him into gear so that we can head into the playoffs, because we know he elevates his game into the playoffs. That's why we have him. But now we're in trouble. I guess Tyler Bozak, who they said he'd be out 7 to 10 days. He should be back for the Leafs' next game, which fortunately is some time away. We have 6 days before our next game against the New Jersey Devils. But if Tyler Bozak isn't ready to go for there, then you have Kadri on the first line, you have Jay McClement, and then Trevor Smith. And it'll be a call-up for whoever's going to come in and take that fourth spot, or is it going to be somebody they pick up on waivers? They're getting real thin down in the middle of the center position, and it's not a spot. It's a spot at the beginning of the year that we said, man, look at the depth the Leafs have at center. I mean, we have Jay McClement on the fourth line, and now suddenly he's on the second line. Oh, how things can change. Other things that I noticed in this game, why did the Leafs lose this game? Aside from being tired, and we'll use all those excuses. I mean, they hadn't played since Wednesday. It's not like this was a back-to-back-to-back or a 3-4. It was a pretty realistic rest time for any NHL team. And I think one guy that really struggled, and I love that he's still up playing and that he's going to continue being a Leaf this season, Morgan Reilly's our rookie defenseman who has played really well, particularly in the last 2 games against Edmonton and Calgary. I mean, against Edmonton, for all intents and purposes, he scored his first NHL goal. Kadri's backside got credit, but Morgan Reilly struggled in this game. He couldn't contain Henrik Sedin as he came around the net, nor could Nazem Kadri, really. But Morgan Reilly, there was a few times when he just looked lost. I believe it was on the 4th goal scored where he was just completely out of position. It was the 3rd goal that was scored, and there were 2 guys in front, and he had backed away, was looking the other way, and turned and tried to make the play, but by the time that he was actually able to try and get his stick on the puck, well, there was 2 Canucks players out in front, and they easily put it in. And so I just think that Morgan Reilly, I don't think that it was a step back. It wasn't a bad thing. It's never a bad thing when your team gets trashed if your team can turn it around and take the things that happened and do something with it and use it for motivation and for some game film, for some ammunition to be able to say, we are not as good as we think we are. We're not as bad as we think we are. When you're losing, or when you do get trashed a little bit like they did against the Canucks, it's never a bad thing. Early on in the season, we're 10-5 now. We're still one of the top teams in the Eastern Conference point-wise, and I think that this game, it'll be a wake-up call. Just like the game that we saw against Columbus and the game we saw against Carolina last week, those games, I feel, woke the Leafs up in some respects. And so it's not a horrible thing. One thing that I noticed about Colton Orr is that lately he's been playing a bigger role in holding the puck in the zone. And I know that I talked about this on a previous episode of Leafs Cast, but Colton Orr has almost come to the point for me where I don't want to see him dropping the gloves every time, at least not in a staged kind of way. I don't need Colton Orr fighting the other team's big guy just for the heck of it. It just doesn't appeal to me. I don't need it. I'm not a huge fan of stage fighting. I'm not completely against stage fighting because I think that it can have a positive effect on your team when needed, but I'd just prefer to let Fraser McLaren play that role. If Fraser McLaren's going to be in the game, let Colton Orr try to play because he's actually produced some results. The guy can hit, and the guy isn't the worst skater that we have. Fraser McLaren, the guy can't skate for his life, but he can fight. And he'll throw hits and he'll do his best to contribute, but I think Colton Orr's the better player. And I say let Colton Orr get in there and actually use his in-game ability as opposed to the side game, which a fight can help you, it can hurt you, or it can simply be neutral. But I look at the hit that he threw in the first period that sparked the Leafs for the next 5 minutes until Phil Kessel decided to drop the gloves with Alex Burrows. The Leafs looked like, oh, all right, we're going to get the next goal here. We're going to come back. And I think that Colton Orr possesses an ability to spark the Leafs beyond just getting into a fight. And so I think that some of the things that the Leafs did in this game, you look at each individual piece. Okay, Phil Kessel got into a fight. All right, whatever. Okay, David Clarkson and Kevin Bieksa kind of get into it, and they go off. It's a 4-on-4. Okay, you have a couple different penalties for the league. You have the fighting major that Colton Orr had with Tom Sestito, and did that help or hurt the momentum? Not necessarily sure. You had just kind of stupid penalties by the Leafs. Paul Ranger trying to clear the zone and just completely shanking it and it going over the boards. You had the Cassian and Clarkson deal with James Van Riemsdyk boarding on Darren Archibald, and there was just some stupid plays by the Leafs. And I know that when the game gets away from you that you tend to kind of try to make up for it physically, but it wasn't just late in the game. It was early in the game when the Leafs still had a chance. They just made some big-time mistakes that set them back, and they never really got going. And so I think, what do we take from this game? We take the fact that in a 4-0 game, in a game that was 3-0, we still managed to kill off a 5-on-3, full 2 minutes of a 5-on-3 against an incredibly potent power play with tons of skill packed on there, with Kessler and the Sedin twins and Edler, all those guys out there. And I'm pretty sure it was, I'm not sure who the other guy was, out on the power play at that time, at least on the main unit. But the Leafs killed it off. They did well, and they worked hard, and they got in the shooting lanes. That was one thing that I really can take away from this game and say, okay, at least we did this. I know that that's kind of excuse-ish feeling, but I think it's just something positive to take away. It's something to look at and say, well, we did about 50 things wrong, but we did a couple things right. Let's keep doing those things right. And the thing we did right was get in the lanes of the shooters, especially on the 5-on-3. There was nowhere to go, and it definitely eases my mind going forward, knowing that not only do we have a good 5-on-4 penalty kill, but we can also make it happen on the down 2 men. And that's a definite positive thing to take away from this game. The Vancouver Canucks, congratulations to them. A 4-0 win. Roberto Luongo gets the shutout. He faced 21 Leaf shots, and some of them, mind you, were actually some pretty good scoring chances. Now, for the 21 shots the Leafs had on goal, you're probably talking 9-10 scoring chances. So the Leafs, even though their shot total low, still in comparison to where their shots are, their scoring chances are rather high. Nevertheless, Roberto Luongo with the shutout, the Canucks with the win. Next time that you hear from me, it will be a pregame for the New Jersey Devils game next Friday. I would love to hear your comments, your questions about the Vancouver game or about the game coming up. Want to get you involved? Just comment on the blog post or on Twitter or on Facebook, wherever you want to find us, LeafsCast.com or Facebook.com/LeafsCast, or tweet directly at me. My name is Mark Paul, and that is exactly what my Twitter name is, @MarkPaul. You can hit me up. Would love to chat with you about the Leafs if you're interested in anything that we do, partnering or hopping on the show and talking Leafs, or if you're a New Jersey Devils fan and you want to kind of give us a skinny on the Devils. I would love it. This has been Leafs Cast. Hope you enjoyed the show. We will talk to you later, and by we, I mean I. Bye-bye, everybody.